Have you ever felt shoved around by someone who's stronger than you? By someone who has some kind of power over you? I think that most people have felt this way at some time in their lives. By a bad boss at a job that they really need, by somebody at school that you have to see every day, or maybe even somebody in your family that you depend on. This experience is classic bullying, and it happens all the time, even in the Bible. And if you try to break free, it might even get worse. The story in chapter 14 of Genesis struck me in that way, as the first bullying situation in the Bible. And as you'll see, it did not turn out so good. This is the way it starts. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel the king of Shinar, and Arioch the king of Ellasar, Kedorlaomer the king of Elam, and Tidal the king of nations, that they made war with Bera the king of Sodom, and with Birsha the king of Gomorrah, Shinab the king of Admah, and Shemeber the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined in the valley of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. So this is about a war between the king of Elam together with his allies against some of the kingdoms around Canaan, the powerful against the weaker. And if you've ever felt shoved around by someone stronger, stick with me because this story from Genesis has more to say about that situation. By the way, welcome to Carving the Bible. My name is Francisco, and on this channel I'm carving the Bible in granite to preserve it in stone. And as I carve it, I research and reflect on the verses for each tablet. And in this video, I'm working on Genesis chapter 14, verses 1 to 13. So, verse 4 explains what's happening. 12 years they had served Kedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. So these Canaanite kingdoms have been vassal states of Elam, a very typical arrangement for that time and place. Smaller kingdoms paid larger ones to basically leave them alone, usually with silver, gold, agriculture, and men for their armies. These larger kingdoms are basically taking the lunch money from these smaller ones. And the Canaanite kingdoms, after 12 years, decide that they've had enough. They're going to stop paying. This was considered rebellion. So the bullies get together and decide they're going to basically kick some butt. And along the way, they're going to knock some others back into line. Now, these next few verses have some names that I don't know how to pronounce, so my apologies in advance. And in the 14th year came Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaim of Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in Shavith Kirjathaim, and the Horites under Mount Seir, to El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to En Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt at Hazazon Tamar. So the army of Elam and its allies went on campaign against Canaan, but along the way they subdued other rebelling areas, or possibly gathered new vassal states. It's worth saying that this kind of campaign was typical across the Bronze Age Near East. The Assyrians did it, the Babylonians did it, the Persians did it, Elam did it. Every year when the heavy rain stopped and more food was available, the armies began to march. But starting with verse 8, we get to a story that we're interested in. What happened in Canaan? So this is how it goes. And the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar, went out, and they joined battle with them in the valley of Siddim. With Kedorlaomer the king of Elam, and Tidal the king of nations, and Amraphel the king of Shinar, and Arioch the king of Ellasar, 4 kings with the 5. And the valley of Siddim was full of pits of asphalt, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and they fell there. And they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the property of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their victuals, and departed. And they took Lot and his property, Abram's brother's son, and departed, for he dwelt in Sodom. So the Canaanite kings get defeated. 2 of them tried to retreat through tar pits. They get stuck and fall in. Now, this is true about the geography around the Dead Sea. It really has this bitumen sludge, and if you fall into a tar pit, it's almost impossible to get out. Then the king of Elam and his allies had an open hand to do as they please. They took property and food, again, typical plundering for that time and place. And as part of the looting, we learned that they took Lot, Abram's nephew. Here's verse 13. And one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, and he dwelt by the oaks of Mamre the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol, and the brother of Aner, and these were Abram's allies. So this verse tells us how Abram got involved. Someone who had escaped from the battle came and told him what happened, and we're set up for the next part of the story, what Abram does about it. I found that interesting that this story reads like an Assyrian or Babylonian chronicle. It lists kings and places, years of servitude, battles, plunder. It's very different from earlier stories which talk about larger, bigger mythological themes like creation, the flood, the Tower of Babel. This story sounds like something that really could have happened. Now, this change in tone would have made it more real for the people of that time, who experienced being shoved around by kings and empires. They understood how power works. When governments flex their power, ordinary people get caught up and many times destroyed. We see this in Gaza today, with more than 1 million people caught between Hamas and the State of Israel. In this story, the bullying isn't abstract. It drags families into the mess, in this case, Abram's family. And Genesis isn't just telling us about ancient kings, it's showing us something we all know. Bullies sometimes win. They're bigger, they're stronger, and they use that power to take what they want. Genesis 14 is brutally honest about that. Sometimes the stronger crush the weak. But it also tells us that the story isn't over. I want to add that for me, the Bible is first about human experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it folds that experience into an interpretation of a relationship with God, all of which makes for a big, usually messy, but very human set of stories.